Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be talking all about how to become a conversational rock star in English.
Ooh, I like that conversational rock star.
Yeah, right. So we're looking at a podcast that's got all these awesome tips, especially if you're just starting out with English, or if you just want to, feel more confident when you're chatting away.
I think this is going to be really helpful for our listeners because I know a lot of people get nervous, when they're trying to speak English.
Yeah, absolutely. And this podcast is like the perfect guide. It breaks everything down so you don't feel overwhelmed.
It's almost like having a cheat sheet for conversations.
Exactly. Okay, so one of the first things this podcast stresses is the importance of starting simple.
Yeah, which might seem obvious, but it's something we often forget, when we're nervous or we're trying to impress someone.
So true. It's like we overthink it and then we end up stumbling over our words.
Right. So the podcast suggests easing into conversations, especially with people you've just met.
It's like you're building a bridge, right?
Exactly. You wouldn't start with the most complex part first.
You got to lay a solid foundation.
And that foundation can be as simple as commenting on the weather.
Oh, yeah. Or the surroundings, maybe even just the coffee you're both drinking.
It's about finding common ground and reducing that initial cognitive overload.
Okay, so we've laid the foundation with some small talk. Now, how do we build on that and really get the conversation going?
Well, the podcast has this brilliant tip. Embrace the power of open-ended questions.
Ooh, I love this one. It's such a game changer.
It really is. Instead of asking closed questions that just lead to a yes or no answer.
Which basically kills the conversation before it even starts.
Exactly. You want to ask questions that invite the other person to share more.
To open up and really express themselves.
And the podcast gives this great example. Instead of asking, did you like the movie?
Which is so closed-ended.
Right. Try asking, what did you think of the movie?
Boom. Suddenly you've opened the door for a real discussion.
You're inviting the other person to share their thoughts and feelings.
And think about it from their perspective. When someone asks you an open-ended question, it makes you feel heard.
It shows that they're genuinely interested in what you have to say.
Which is such a powerful way to build rapport. Not just in English conversations, but in any interaction you have.
It's a universal principle of communication.
But asking great questions is only half the battle, right?
Absolutely. You've got to be a good listener, too.
The podcast really emphasizes the art of active listening.
Which is more than just hearing the words.
It's about really absorbing them.
Paying attention to the nuances.
Responding in a way that shows you're engaged.
It's like you're shining a spotlight on the other person.
Making them feel seen and heard. And it goes beyond just the words.
Right, you've got to pay attention to their body language, their tone of voice.
Even their pauses and hesitations.
All those nonverbal cues are giving you valuable information.
The podcast has this example. Imagine someone says, I went to the beach over the weekend.
You could just say, cool.
Which is kind of like a conversation killer.
Right. A much more engaging response would be, that sounds fun. What did you do there?
You see how that keeps the conversation flowing.
You're inviting them to share more.
And it shows that you're genuinely interested.
Active listening is so powerful.
It can make or break a conversation.
Okay, so we've talked about starting simple, asking open-ended questions, and being an active listener. What else?
Well, the podcast also introduces this idea of using power phrases.
Ooh, I like that, power phrases.
Right. It's like they give you these linguistic shortcuts to navigate conversations.
So you can avoid those awkward silences.
Or stumbles. And the best part is they're really easy to learn.
Yeah, give us some examples.
Okay, so things like, that sounds interesting. Or, I didn't know that. Or, what do you mean by that?
Yeah.
Or, could you tell me more?
They seem basic, but they're super effective.
They keep the conversation moving. And each one serves a specific purpose.
Some express interest, some seek clarification, some encourage the other person to elaborate.
It's like having a toolkit of conversational tricks up your sleeve.
But the podcast also makes an important point about cultural context.
Oh, yeah, that's crucial.
Because what might be polite in one culture could be rude in another.
So even though these power phrases are helpful, you got to be mindful of the situation.
You always want to adapt your language accordingly.
Right. Direct translations don't always work.
And sometimes a phrase that seems harmless can be offensive in another culture.
So it's about being sensitive and respectful.
And always being open to learning.
Which brings us to something that's inevitable when you're learning a new language.
Mistakes. But the podcast has a really encouraging message about this.
It's like they want to take away the fear of making mistakes,
Because let's be honest, everyone makes mistakes.
especially when they're learning something new.
But the podcast reframes mistakes as valuable learning opportunities.
It's like they're saying, hey, it's okay to mess up. It's how you learn.
They encourage you to embrace the mistakes.
See them as feedback.
Signs that you're pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone.
It's like each mistake is a little flag saying,
Yeah.
hey, pay attention. There's something new to learn here.
And the more you embrace those mistakes, the faster you'll progress.
I love that perspective. It takes the pressure off.
And the podcast even gives a tip for handling corrections gracefully.
Yeah, just say thank you for correcting me.
Simple but effective.
Shows that you're open to learning and improving,
It's about having a growth mindset,
embracing challenges.
seeing setbacks as opportunities for growth.
And that applies not just to language learning, but to life in general.
Okay, so we've talked about mindset, but there's no substitute for good old-fashioned.
Practice.
Yes, the podcast really hammers this point home.
It's not enough to just know the tips and tricks
You've got to put them into action.
consistently and deliberately.
Hmm.
Practice is the key to unlocking fluency and confidence.
And the great thing is there are so many ways to practice.
You can join English-speaking groups,
Chat with friends,
find a language exchange partner.
or even just talk to yourself in English.
I do that all the time.
Me too. And it's actually really effective.
You can describe your day,
Rehearse conversations in your head.
practice new vocabulary,
It's like having a built-in conversation partner.
someone who's always available and never judges you.
But the podcast also explains something really cool about consistent practice.
It's not just about building habits.
It's about rewiring your brain.
Wait, what?
There's this concept called neuroplasticity.
Which is?
Basically, the brain's ability to change and adapt throughout our lives.
So you're saying that by practicing English, I'm actually changing the physical structure of my brain.
Yep, that's exactly what the research shows.
Wow, that's mind-blowing.
The more you use those language pathways in your brain, the stronger and more efficient they become.
It's like building a muscle, but for your language skills.
Exactly, and that's what makes practice so powerful.
It's not just about memorizing words and phrases.
It's about literally transforming your brain to become a more fluent and confident English speaker.
We've gone from simple conversation starters to rewiring our brains. That's quite a journey.
It is, and we've only just begun.
There's so much more to uncover in this deep dive,
So make sure you join us for part 2.
where we'll explore even more fascinating insights from this awesome podcast.
And in the meantime, here's something to ponder. How can you apply these conversational skills, not just in English, but in any language or interaction you have?
Oh, that's a good one.
Because at the end of the day, it's all about connection.
Engagement.
Genuine human interaction.
See you in part 2.